Greetings, YouTubians, and welcome back to Wayne Sharp World, where today we are taking a look at the Vero Engineering Axon. Now, before I go any further in this review, I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in today. If you like what you see, please do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, follow along, and I will continue to bring you guys the content. Now, let's take a look at some specs on this knife right here. We have an overall length of 8 inches, with a blade length coming in at 3.4 inches and a cutting edge of 3.25 inches. We have a close length of 4.6 inches and a handle thickness of 0.52 inches with a handle width coming in at 1.07 inches. Blade material we are working with on this knife is M390 with a blade thickness coming in at 0.135. A sheep's foot style blade with a flat grind, handle material being end-cut carbon fiber. Got a little more to say about that when we get to the handle and ergos. A liner lock with a very nice solid lockup, and a user of right hand tip up carry, a weight coming in at 3.8 ounces, and a price of $295. Now let's take a look at some quick size comparisons on this guy right here. Pull out a couple American-made knives. Not that this one is American-made. We have the Microtech SOCOM Elite, and we also have the ZT-0562CF. As you can see, it's somewhat similar to the 0562. It's not quite as long. Also a little shorter than the SOCOM Elite. The Axon is not a small knife, but these are all both slightly bigger in handle and blade lengths. And a couple other ones that I think will help gauge everyone's understanding of the size of this knife is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, as well as the Spyderco Shaman. As you can see, a little shorter than the Shaman, and actually not too far off from the PM2, which is a little surprising. Usually the PM2, especially the handle, kind of towers over other knives, but it's really not too far off. Just a little more in the back on the PM2, but pretty good size comparisons there. And then I have one more that, of all the knives in my collection, I think it's the best comparison, and that is the Snex Mini Buster. As you can see, that there is pretty much a spot-on size comparison as far as handle length, handle width, very similar there. Even blade thickness is pretty similar. I think the Snex Mini Buster may be just a hair thicker there. But overall, definitely the closest knife I have to compare. The only thing that separates it a little is the flipper tab on the Mini Buster. Kind of takes away from the grip. It changes the grip up a little on these two knives. But pretty close comparisons there. Hope that helped you guys out. And now let's talk about this knife. And let's start with the blade, because the blade on this guy is absolutely, in my opinion, the best part of this knife. It is executed very, very well. A very unique sheep's foot. It has kind of a new, just a sleeker look. I like the way it kind of comes down abruptly here. It's not quite as smooth. Nice lines, very nice lines on it. And we have an edge of 15 thousandths behind the edge. This knife is a pretty darn good slicer for a couple reasons. One being that 15 thousandths behind the edge, and the other being the fact that this is a pretty wide blade. And when a blade is this wide and you have an edge that thin, you're able to work the grind up very gradually as you go up the blade. So all in all, it makes for some very good cutting geometry, and it can slice through just about anything pretty darn well. I also really like the milled out pocket area on this blade. Talk a lot more about that when we get to the action. I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this. I wasn't sure if it would work or if it would be a dud, and it is absolutely not a dud. I'm also a huge fan of the blade branding on this guy, or lack thereof. You have Vero right up here, and that's all. You have nothing else on this blade. It is sterile on the sides. I like the font they use. Obviously, basically the font that makes the brand, and falls right in line. Goes very, very well. Kind of like the Ray Laconico style, but also different because Ray does his horizontally as they're lining their font up vertically here. Really like the way that looks. The V, it ties together very well. It's a nice, subtle little compliment to the blade, and I think it works very, very well. Then you get to the handle and ergos, and this is where things go south for me. This is where I think my review is going to differ from other reviewers, and I'm kind of shocked that it is, because there's something about this knife that I don't think is being emphasized enough. But first, let's start with the positives, because the handle width and handle shape of this blade, or of this knife, is very, very nice. The width is just about perfect for me, or the width is just about perfect for me, and the thickness is also pretty much perfect for me. It could be a little thicker, and I think I'd like it just as much, but it just comes in at very, very nice measurements for me. I'm also really love this end cut carbon fiber. We do not see enough of this carbon fiber in the market right now, and we really need to see more of it. I think it's just a matter of time before you see it with more brands using it, because it's very attractive. It's not quite as flashy as other forms of carbon fiber, but you get that strength, you get the lightness of it, and you still get a nice little pattern that you can see, but it just doesn't scream at you. And I really, really like that. I'm really happy Vero went with this. It's another thing that I think has really helped their knives stand apart from the competition. But then there's the bad. There's two things on this handle that really irked me, but the number one thing was absolutely this monstrosity right here. Now, I had to take a little extra time to word this review, to think about what I was going to say, because I didn't want to bash it and be too harsh and just be the guy that's trying to come off like, you know, he's trying to get everyone's attention. But I got to say, when I held this knife in hand at first, I thought, what? What is that? What is this thing right here? This ramp of the clip is the worst hotspot for a pocket clip I've ever felt in my life. And after I held this in my hand for a little while, I had to set the guy down, and I went over there to my other knives, and I put every other knife I had from Spyderco. I held every single one I have in my collection, and no pocket clip in my collection, which is almost 100 knives, it's not as bad as this. There's nothing as bad as this pocket clip. It is a major hotspot, one of the worst I've ever felt, and it also sticks out in the pocket too much. Even when you put this knife in the pocket and you're carrying it, the way it sticks out, the fact that it's not really chamfered that much at all, it is a little. I mean, you can definitely tell it's been chamfered a little, but it's still aggressive. It still gives you that scrapey feeling. And you got to be careful getting into a car, because if you get too close, you'll scratch the side of your car with this thing. I feel it kind of scrape my wrist sometimes if I'm walking and my arm brushes up against the side of my pocket where the clip is. You feel that. I mean, it is an absolute hot spot. It's the definition of a hot spot. And you guys know me. I mean, I don't normally complain about pocket clips. I really don't. I think I'm overly fair with pocket clips on this channel, but this one is just, it's terrible. And I'm shocked that other reviewers haven't pointed this out with more emphasis. I don't get it. But again, it's not, that's not really here nor there. It's not my business. I don't really care that much, but I have to bring attention to this because it's that bad. It really is that bad. It's a terrible pocket clip. The other problem I had was when I got this, a viewer sent this to me for review, and he had put skiff bearings on it. He also sent me the stock bearings, said, hey, I know you probably don't want to review it with the skiff bearings, so here's the stock bearings. Go, feel free to disassemble it, do what you want to do your review. So I went to go taking this guy apart. And as you can see up here, take a look at this pivot screw. You see how it goes relatively deep in the bit hole. You can tell by the walls there, the rigid walls where you stick the bit in. There's plenty of room to where it's deep enough in there you get a good solid connection, and it's easy to take the pivot screw out. But then you get down to these screws here, and look how much more shallow that is. I couldn't do it. I put a bit in this screw right here, and I tried to unscrew it, and I started to get that strip feeling, like it was obviously losing grip and kind of popping out. And since I didn't want to risk stripping the screws in a knife that's not mine, I stopped trying. And that really upset me because I hate reviewing things with stock or with anything aftermarket that would improve the action of the knife. And I mean, obviously, we'll talk about action here in just a second, but just the fact that I couldn't disassemble this knife was very disappointing. I messaged the viewer that sent me this immediately and said, "Hey man, I'm sorry, I don't want to take this apart. I don't want to risk stripping the screw in your knife." He's like, "No, I get it. He had the same problem." Obviously, it was his knife, so he got a little more aggressive with it, but I wasn't taking that risk. So I'm really shocked that in a $300 knife, you have screws of this quality that just don't go down deep enough. That's pretty frustrating. I think they definitely need to get new screws. I don't know. It looks like there's 2 layers of holes in here, one for a smaller bit and one for a bigger bit, I think. Or if it's these may be proprietary screws that they were using a special bit to screw them in. I don't know. But I have Weehaw bits, which I think everybody knows. It's kind of a standard for pretty darn good bits in the industry. I was really, really struggling with this enough to where I wasn't comfortable to continue moving forward with it, so I stopped. So that's not good. Needs new screws there. This one appears fine. And as you can see, it goes deep enough. It's pretty obvious just looking at it right here. The one on the left has a much deeper pocket to put the bit in than the one on the right. And it just makes sense that this one comes out easier and this one feels like you're going to strip it. That's a big problem. So absolutely, totally, almost disgusted with this clip. And the screws need to be better. I would like to see better screws on this. Moving into the action, though, is another bright spot. The action's very, very good, but as I said, with skiff bearings, that's how I'm going to have to judge it. Now, the viewer that sent this in to me, we had a pretty long talk back and forth about the action of the knife. I said, I need to at least get your opinion. How good was it before you put the skiff bearings on? And the way he explained it to me was the deployment of the blade was always good. The deployment was always good, regardless of how you were doing it. It came out very smooth, very quick, crisp, all that stuff. Very good action on deployment. But the skiff bearings made it really good on the close. When you go to close it, that right there is the skiff bearings at work. Little stiff on the close, and the skiff bearings made it much, much smoother. So with that being said, regardless of the fact that there's skiff bearings in here, I'm going to give this knife pretty much an A in action, and I think it would be. This knife was designed very well. Outside of this clip, it was designed extremely well, with a bigger, slightly, the blade don't feel heavy, but in overall comparison to the rest of the knife, it is a heavy blade, and when you have a heavy blade, it's pretty easy to whip a blade out and get a nice, smooth, buttery action, which is exactly what you have here, whether you're front flipping or middle finger flicking, or if you're slow rolling out with the clip, that also works very well. So, all in all, the action's fantastic. Not an ideal front flipper for someone that's never front flipped a knife, because you do have a nice minimal amount of flipper tab to work with. But I will say up front, I personally like this. It's not the best front flipper I've ever had, but it's very good. Very good. I enjoy front flipping it. Don't really have any issue doing it, but someone that doesn't front flip a knife regularly would probably struggle with this at first, but I'm sure they could probably learn it. The middle finger flick, the cutout works very, very well. I wasn't sure how well that'd work, how well my finger would bite into it here, but it bites in very well. It feels very good, and it's done. It's just done very well. I like the way they lined up the pocket with the grind of the knife, as well as I don't know my knife terminology all the time as well as I should, but the grind in general, I don't know if the side of the grind has a different terminology than the top of the grind, but regardless, they kind of squared it up in the corner, and it looks really good on both sides. Aesthetically, it's very, very pleasing, especially on the show side. The show side, it's a very, very attractive knife, and it's also very attractive on this side. Just the fact that I know how bad that clip is kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth on this side. But overall, very smooth action, very, very attractive lines. It does live up to the hype in that fact. in that regard, that the action's good. It is a fun knife to play with. Overall thoughts, though. Overall thoughts, ultimately, I'm pretty disappointed. Don't get me wrong, it's still a pretty good knife, but it has some real flaws. The screws, or the body screws, I shouldn't say, the pivot screw is fine. The body screws are not ideal to me. They need to be deeper, easier to for disassembly. But this clip right here, it's a train wreck. It's that bad. But I have heard that Vero is looking at improving this and doing something to it. Whatever he does, I really hope it works, because as is with this clip, I would not buy this knife. And I'm glad I got this sent in from a viewer, because I've tried to buy this knife a couple times, and it shocks me at how fast these knives are selling out, and continuously selling out with such a big problem. I think I'm very lenient on clips on this channel, and the fact that it's that bad, I'm just pretty shocked that you don't hear more about it. What I would like to see is more of this style of a clip. And pay no attention to the actual design of the clip, but just the flatness, the flat top, with just the contact point coming down on the handle. That's what I want to see on this Axon here. As you can see, it has that ramp. And the ramp is what really destroys the clip. It comes out way too far and is just it's not good in any stretch of the imagination. So I think if they could change that, if they could go from the ramp to the flat top with just a little contact point down there, I think that would make this knife right here an absolute excellent piece. But really, the way it is right now, it's so uncomfortable in hand, I wouldn't like it. But it's actually really comfortable in your left hand. If you're a lefty, this knife, as you saw in my thumbnail, this knife is made for you. Right-handed knife, but it's better in your left hand because your fingers wrap right around the clip. And I gotta say, the ergos like this are absolutely fantastic. They're really good. I probably should have mentioned this in the ergo section, but it slipped my mind. But no, if you're a lefty, I'd absolutely recommend this to you. In all honesty, as long as you're okay with sticking it in your pocket kind of backwards, when you have this knife in hand, it feels fantastic. It really, really does. So it is a right-hand knife made for lefties. If you're a righty, I would pass. I really would. I would honestly pass until they improve that clip. If they improve that clip and flatten it out, it would be good to go. It really would be. But the way it is right now, it feels that bad in hand. I wouldn't recommend it. I do love the design. I love the action. I love the blade. Love the edge. It's a slicey guy. The clip's got to change. It just absolutely has to change. I hope they do, because if they do change the clip, I'll buy one, because I really like it that much. I think it'd be a great piece to add to the collection. But I don't enjoy carrying it with this clip. That's all there is to it. I'm not really happy to say that, but it is the truth. So let me know what you guys think. There's no way I'm the only person that doesn't find this clip to be a major hotspot, or at least me and the viewer that sent me this knife. So let me know what you think. I'm interested in hearing your guys' reviews and overall thoughts of the knife. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope it gave you a little more of another look at this knife. And let me know, you trying to get one? What are your thoughts on the Vero Engineering Axon? I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And until the next one, I'm out.